Welcome to another video with Love, Light, and Lunacy. My name is Erica, and I just wanted to shoot a disclaimer. This is in no way a doomsday video. I'm just hoping to educate everyone on the solar flares, the auroras, the CMEs, and the effects that will actually have here on Earth for us moving forward and up until 2025. Much love.
About the sun, more specifically about solar flares. Flares that are causing radio blackouts on Earth. This happened on Sunday. A solar flare interfered with short-wave radio communication and caused a blackout in Southeast Asia and parts of Australia. Now, scientists say this incident will not be the last.
In 1859, there was a geomagnetic storm so big that the aurora was visible in Hawaii. They had telegraph systems. Some of the operators were reported to be able to send messages even when they weren't plugged into their batteries. They were just using the current generated from this geomagnetic storm. This thing was the largest geomagnetic storm in recorded history, and it was called the Carrington Event. A solar superstorm like this is not unusual and could happen today. And it would be way worse, like way worse. It would cause more than the top 10 natural disasters of the US combined to recover from. So yeah, these solar superstorms are getting more and more likely as we move towards 2025. So first of all, that event is the same type of event that causes the aurora. Have you ever heard of solar cycles? The sun has these periods of activity where there's a period of when there are the most sunspots, and then there's a period of like a little bit more calm, about every 11 years. And why every 11 years? Any guesses? I was thinking maybe coincidence, but it turns out that on average, every 11 years, the sun's north and south poles switch. So the Carrington event happened coming into the maximum of the 10th cycle of the sun. The 10th cycle since 1755, when we started recording the sun cycles. No one knew until we were able to record and see these sunspots. And do you know what sunspots are? Have you ever seen a picture of the sun with all of these lines? Those are all magnetic field lines. And if you have a ton of them going into the sun, that's where you'll see a sunspot. Sometimes those magnetic field lines can get like wrapped around each other and twisted, and sometimes they'll just like snap and break into more of a smooth kind of configuration. And when that happens, we see a solar flare, like a pop, like this release. So saying we missed a storm. So every 11 years, we have more of a potential for a hit of a solar superstorm. And the last time it missed Earth by 9 days because the sun was just facing the wrong way. And that happened in 2012, the same year as Earth's ascension began. And it missed us by 9 days because the sun spins about every 25 days, and it just happened to be not facing the Earth by a 9-day miss. So now we're in the 25th solar cycle, and we're coming into this increased period of solar flares and increased CMEs, or coronal mass ejections, which are the sun vomits, essentially. Whenever we get that snapping, it releases a lot of mass that shoots material off into space that we call solar wind. It literally is mass because a bunch of SpaceX satellites just fell out of the sky when there was a big solar wind. And that's because the atmosphere literally became thicker. It became too dense and slowed down the satellites to the point where they could not recover, and they fell to Earth and just burned in our atmosphere. That's just happened. So this is a big deal when the sun's magnetic field flips. And for us, what it means is these periods of heightened and potentially extreme solar activity. So the peak of the solar cycle will happen in 2025. So that means until then, it's going to be increased activity, which means a higher chance of seeing these auroras in different places of the world. Geomagnetic storms, coming in like crazy. And what will mostly happen when a solar storm occurs is that fortunately nothing will happen to our physical bodies, but things are going to happen to our electrical systems because it's a bunch of charged particles. During the Carrington event, this was even before the war, so there was only telegraphs, and the telegraph systems were sparking. So imagine using your computer and having sparks through the keyboard. Some of them were turning on fire, and some were seeing swirling colors in the world, in Cuba, in Mexico, and even in Colombia. And some people thought their cities were actually on fire because there was this predominantly red glow all over the sky. So, how do these solar superstorms affect us? So, when a solar storm occurs, all of this mass is ejected from the sun and heads towards us. And do you know why that creates the auroras? Do you know why neon signs light up? When you put a high voltage across a gas, that gives the electrons in the gas enough energy to fly off. When the electrons come back together with the gas that they flew off of, it'll emit this flame, this light. So with the aurora, it's very, very similar. You have all of this mass of hot plasma raining down on Earth from the sun, and it'll bump electrons off of the gas in the atmosphere. And then those electrons come back together with their atoms and they release light. So Earth is like a neon sign. You know what? You can actually detect rays coming down from space with fluorescent light bulbs. There was a guy at CERN and he took a fluorescent light bulb and was able to see when we had cosmic rays coming down because he was getting flashes of light inside this fluorescent light bulb. So we're just blown away at the spectacle of like the Earth's defenses as it keeps solar waves from hitting us. Like, ooh, pretty. And do you know what causes these different colors? You change the gas that's inside the tube. So remember how there was talking about sometimes those purples and reds and the greens of the auroras, and they happen in different layers of the atmosphere. And the reason is because of the different gases at different altitudes in our atmosphere. There's a website you can follow where you look at the KP index for those of you who are wanting to keep track of these aurora lights and these CMEs. It's kind of amazing. Storm classes. So the ones that just happened can cause a lot of damage as they increase. Satellite disruptions, light flickerings, and if we get a G5, that would be a widespread power outage. Failures of transformers. They will just build up too much charge that they will essentially just blow, creating fires. We could have grid blackouts, electrical grid collapses, like whole cities, whole continents. Not the buildings collapsing, of course, but the entire power. And something like that actually happened in 1989, the year I was born. In Quebec, there were 6 million people that were lost power, and it was not brought up for 9 to 12 hours. And that wasn't even the largest solar storm that could have happened. You won't be able to track your GPS. You'd have no fridge, you'd have no Xbox, you'd have no washer and dryer, no computer. You wouldn't be able to charge your vehicle. And if the grid goes down, it's terrifying. Anything that's plugged in, your computer that was plugged in could be fried. The chances are the smaller electronics won't be as affected. But if there's evidence of a solar flare incoming, the best things that we can do is to unplug all of our shit. The economic impacts of something like the Carrington Event, for say, was estimated at potentially only $2.6 trillion to recover from, which could potentially take 4 to 10 years to recover from, they're stating right now. Because of the grids going down, when there's that much damage to that much critical infrastructure, it's going to take so much time to not only make it, but to repair it all. This is a serious, serious problem. Something that scientists have been trying to warn us about, but they don't even truly understand the impact that's going to happen when this actually goes down. We think of this as such a modern society, like whereas, the problems of the past aren't going to affect us, but in fact, this is a problem that affects us more now in our modern day because we rely so much on electronic-based technology. This wouldn't have affected Cleopatra. And I'm not a doomsday person, but we need to boost our infrastructure. We need to understand that when one of these storms hits us again, and it is, they looked at the last 150 years and they found that there were 6 major solar superstorms thus far. So this is not an unlikely event. So these are the biggest solar storms ever in recorded history, and they're near misses, and they are only increasing. We all just have to pay attention, my friends. I send you guys much love.